Sarah had always been careful about her social media presence, but lately something felt wrong. It started with the comments on her Instagram photos, always generic, always from the same account at Shadowlens47. Beautiful smile, perfect moment, you look lovely today. At first, she dismissed them as harmless compliments from a follower. But then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The comments weren't just about her photos, they referenced things that weren't in the pictures. Love that blue sweater, he'd written under a photo where she wore red. Hope you enjoyed your coffee at Beans and Dreams. Sarah had worn a blue sweater that day, just not in the photo. And she had gotten coffee at Beans and Dreams, but she'd never posted about it. She checked at Shadowlens47's profile. It was private with no profile picture and only one follower, her. She blocked the account immediately, but the next day there was a new one at Lens of Shadow 74. Same generic comments, same impossible knowledge. The real terror began when she found the USB drive taped under her car's bumper. Her hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop. Hundreds of photos filled the screen, all of her. Walking to work, grocery shopping, sleeping in her bedroom, taken through her window. The timestamps went back 6 months. In the latest folder, titled Soon, there was a single image, her front door key photographed against a white background. Below it, a note in the metadata, I've been practicing with the spare. Sarah's heart stopped. She'd lost her spare key months ago, convinced she'd misplaced it somewhere in her apartment. She grabbed her phone to call the police, but it buzzed with a notification. A new Instagram message from @shadow_lens47_forever. Don't call them yet. Look outside your bedroom window first. With trembling steps, Sarah approached her bedroom window. Across the street in the apartment building's shadows, a flash went off. Then another. Someone was taking pictures of her right now, watching her read the message. Her phone buzzed again, beautiful expression of fear. This will be my favorite shot yet. Sarah ran to her front door, checking the locks, but she realized with growing horror that locks meant nothing to someone who had a key. Someone who had been watching her for months, learning her routines, her vulnerabilities. As she fumbled for her phone to call 911, every light in her apartment went out. In the darkness, she heard it, the soft sound of a key turning in her front door lock. Maya was a cybersecurity expert who thought she knew every trick in the book. She used VPNs, encrypted messaging, and kept her digital footprint minimal. That's why it was so unsettling when her smart home started acting up. It began subtly. Her coffee maker would brew at 3 a.m. Her thermostat would adjust itself to exactly 68 degrees every time she changed it. Her smart TV would turn on to channels she never watched, always pausing on local news stories about missing women. Maya ran diagnostics on her home network, but everything appeared normal. No unauthorized devices, no strange traffic patterns. She changed all her passwords, updated firmware, and even bought new devices. But the incidents continued. Then her Alexa started talking to someone when she wasn't home. Maya discovered this when she checked the voice activity logs. Hours of conversations, but the transcripts only showed Alexa's responses. Yes, she usually gets home by 6:30. She ordered Thai food last Tuesday. She's been sleeping poorly since her mother's funeral. The other voice, the one asking questions, wasn't being recorded. Maya set up hidden cameras throughout her apartment, expecting to catch an intruder. Instead, she found something worse. The cameras captured her going about her daily routine, but in several shots, there were glitches, brief moments where the timestamp jumped forward by several minutes. Someone was editing the feeds in real time, removing themselves from the footage. Her breaking point came when she received an email from her own address. The subject line read, "You're prettier when you're scared." The message contained photos taken inside her apartment over the past week. Maya sleeping, showering, working at her computer. But these weren't from her hidden cameras. The angles were wrong. Maya enhanced one of the photos and spotted it, a tiny reflection in her bathroom mirror. A figure crouched in her bedroom doorway, holding a professional camera with a long lens. She immediately called the police, but when they searched her apartment, they found something that chilled her to the bone. In her bedroom closet, behind her winter coats, was a small hole drilled through the wall. On the other side was the vacant apartment she'd been told was under renovation. The police broke down the door to the adjacent unit. Inside, they found a sophisticated surveillance setup. Monitors showing live feeds from cameras hidden throughout Maya's apartment, voice recording equipment connected to her smart home devices, and walls covered with printed photos of her daily activities, annotated with notes about her schedule, preferences, and habits. But the worst discovery was on the desk. architectural plans for her building's renovation, showing how someone could access the space between walls, and a contractor's badge belonging to someone who'd been working in the building for 3 months. Maya realized that her stalker hadn't hacked her digital life from outside. He'd been living in her walls, watching her through pinhole cameras, listening through sophisticated microphones, close enough to touch her while she slept. The police found evidence that he'd been entering her apartment regularly, always careful to leave no trace, sometimes standing over her bed for hours while she slept. They never found him. The apartment was empty except for a note left on the surveillance desk. Digital security is useless when your stalker holds the physical keys to your world. Lisa first noticed her doppelganger at the grocery store where she worked. Customers kept asking her about conversations they'd had with her on days when she wasn't working. "Thanks for the recipe recommendation last Tuesday," Mrs. Henderson said. "You were so helpful when you walked me to my car." But Lisa had been homesick last Tuesday. She mentioned it to her manager, who pulled the security footage. There, clear as day, was Lisa stocking shelves on her sick day. Same height, same hair, same uniform. The only difference was barely noticeable. The woman on camera smiled differently, held her shoulders at a slightly different angle. Lisa felt sick watching herself move through the store, interacting with customers, behaving like her but not quite her. The incidents escalated. Her neighbors started complaining about noise from her apartment, loud music, parties, shouting, on nights when Lisa was visiting her parents in another city. Her landlord showed her pictures from other tenants. Lisa stumbling drunkenly through the hallways, Lisa screaming at someone on her phone in the lobby. But it wasn't Lisa. She installed a security camera outside her apartment door, but the footage only deepened the mystery. The woman who looked exactly like her would arrive at her building, use Lisa's key, and enter her apartment. Hours later, she'd leave wearing different clothes, Lisa's clothes. Lisa started keeping a detailed journal of her whereabouts, taking time-stamped photos of herself in different locations as alibis. But her doppelganger seemed to anticipate this. She would appear in places Lisa had never been, having conversations Lisa had never had, creating a parallel life that was destroying Lisa's real one. The breaking point came when Lisa was arrested at her workplace. A customer accused her of stealing money from her purse during checkout. The security footage clearly showed Lisa taking the wallet, but Lisa had been in the bathroom when the theft occurred. She had witnesses. During questioning, the police showed her more security footage from around town. Lisa robbing a convenience store. Lisa keying someone's car. Lisa selling drugs in the park. All clearly her face, her body, her mannerisms, but crimes she'd never committed. "You have an identical twin?" the detective asked. "No," Lisa whispered, staring at the footage. "I'm an only child." That night, released on bail and suspended from work, Lisa sat in her apartment reviewing the camera footage from her door. She watched her doppelganger enter and leave dozens of times over the past month. But in one clip, something was different. The woman approached Lisa's door but stopped before using the key. She looked directly at the hidden camera and smiled, but it was wrong. The smile was too wide, lasting too long, like someone who had studied smiling but didn't understand it. Then the woman spoke and Lisa's blood froze. It was her voice, but the words made no sense. "The skin fits better now. Soon I won't need to take it off." Lisa enhancement the footage, zooming in on the woman's face. There, at the hairline, was a barely visible seam, like the edge of a mask. But if it was a mask, it was the most perfect one ever created. It moved naturally, expressed emotions, even seemed to breathe. Lisa's phone rang. The caller ID showed her own name. "Hello, Lisa," her own voice said through the phone. "I've been wearing your life for months now. Fits so well. But there's one problem. There can't be two of us. People are starting to notice the discrepancies." "Who are you?" Lisa whispered. "I'm you. The better you. The you that people will remember after tonight." Lisa ran to her door, checking the locks, but she heard the soft sound of a key in the lock. Her doppelganger was coming home. Tom was a sound engineer who specialized in noise pollution analysis. His job required him to have extremely sensitive hearing, which is why he noticed the sounds in his apartment that shouldn't have been there. It started with breathing that wasn't his own. Tom lived alone in a soundproofed apartment, a necessity for his work. But late at night, when everything was perfectly quiet, he could hear it, slow, rhythmic breathing coming from somewhere inside his walls. He initially assumed it was his neighbor, but sound tests proved his apartment was completely isolated. The breathing was coming from inside his unit. Tom set up recording equipment throughout his apartment, using professional-grade microphones that could detect the slightest sounds. The results were disturbing. The breathing was there every night, always starting at 11:47 p.m. and ending at 6:23 a.m. But there were other sounds too, soft footsteps, the creak of floorboards, and occasionally whispers too quiet to understand. Most unsettling was the sound of paper rustling, always in his bedroom, always when he was asleep. Tom installed motion sensors and found no movement in his apartment during these audio events. Whatever was making these sounds was avoiding detection, moving in the spaces between his sensors. One night, Tom pretended to sleep while wearing headphones connected to his recording setup. He heard everything in real time, footsteps approaching his bed, the sound of paper being handled, and then something that made his blood run cold. His own voice whispered back to him. But Tom's lips weren't moving. The next morning he found a journal hidden under his mattress. It was filled with entries in his handwriting, describing his daily activities, his thoughts, his fears. But Tom had never written these entries. The most recent one read, "He's starting to suspect. I may need to become more direct in my observations." Tom took the journal to a handwriting expert, who confirmed it was his writing. But Tom had no memory of writing any of it. He decided to stay awake all night, recording everything. At 11:47 p.m., the breathing started. But this time, Tom could pinpoint its location. It was coming from directly above his bed. Looking up, Tom noticed something he'd never seen before. A small gap between the ceiling beam and the drywall. Too small for a person, but large enough for sophisticated recording equipment. Using a ladder, Tom found a tiny camera and microphone system installed in the gap. But the technology was unlike anything he'd seen. It was recording not just audio and video, but somehow capturing and playing back his own movements and voice with perfect accuracy. The equipment was connected to wires that led into the walls, toward the apartment next door. Tom called the police, but when they investigated the adjacent apartment, they found something impossible. An exact replica of Tom's apartment. Same furniture, same layout, same personal belongings. And sitting at a desk identical to Tom's was a man who looked exactly like Tom, writing in a journal identical to the one found under Tom's mattress. The man looked up when the police entered and spoke in Tom's voice. "You're early. I wasn't finished with today's entry." The police discovered that the man had been living in the duplicate apartment for 8 months, perfectly mimicking Tom's life through the surveillance system. He knew everything about Tom, his routines, his mannerisms, his voice patterns, and had been practicing being Tom. But the most disturbing discovery was in the man's bedroom. A detailed plan titled The Replacement, outlining how he intended to gradually take over Tom's life by first learning to become him, then systematically removing Tom from his own existence. The journal's final entry, written in Tom's handwriting but by someone else's hand, read, "Tomorrow I stop practicing. Tomorrow I become Tom permanently. He won't be needed anymore." Emma noticed her reflection was acting independently 3 weeks after moving into her new apartment. It started small, a slight delay when she moved, her reflection completing gestures a fraction of a second after she did. Emma assumed it was an old mirror playing tricks with the light, but then she realized her reflection was making different facial expressions. When Emma smiled, her reflection looked concerned. When she looked worried, her reflection smiled back. Emma covered all the mirrors in her apartment, but the problem persisted in reflective surfaces everywhere. Windows, her phone screen, even puddles of water. Her reflection had become autonomous and it was watching her. She tried to document the phenomenon, setting up cameras to record herself in front of mirrors. But the recordings showed normal reflections. It was only in real time that her reflection misbehaved. The situation escalated when Emma's reflection started appearing in places where Emma wasn't. Her neighbor mentioned seeing Emma in the lobby mirror when Emma was at work. Her coworker asked why Emma had been staring at her from the bathroom mirror when Emma had been in a meeting. Emma's reflection was living its own life. One night, Emma woke to find her reflection standing in her bedroom mirror, fully dressed, while Emma lay in bed in pajamas. The reflection gestured for Emma to approach the mirror. Against her better judgment, Emma got up and walked toward it. Her reflection mouthed words, "Help me." Emma tried to communicate back, but her reflection shook its head and pointed behind Emma. Emma turned around and saw nothing, but when she looked back at the mirror, her reflection was gone. The mirror showed only an empty bedroom. Emma searched online for similar experiences and found a forum post that made her heart race. Another woman described identical experiences, down to the reflection asking for help. But the post ended abruptly. "She came through last night. There are 2 of me now, but only one of me is real. I can't tell which one I am anymore." Emma called the phone number from the woman's profile, but the person who answered spoke in a voice identical to Emma's. "Emma? I've been waiting for your call. We need to talk." Emma hung up, but her phone immediately rang back. Same voice, "Don't hang up. I know you're scared, but I can explain everything. Meet me at Riverside Park by the fountain. Come alone." "Who are you?" Emma whispered. "I'm you. The real you. You're the reflection." Emma looked in her bathroom mirror. Her reflection wasn't there, just an empty bathroom behind the glass. "That's impossible," Emma said to her phone. "Is it? Think about it. When did you first notice the reflection problems? Right after you moved into that apartment, right? What if you didn't move into an apartment? What if you moved into a reflection? What if you've been living in the mirror world for 3 weeks, and the woman you think is your reflection is actually the real Emma, trying to get back to her life?" Emma ran to every mirror in her apartment. In each one she saw empty rooms, no reflection of herself anywhere. "Meet me at the park," the voice continued. "I'll show you how to get back to the real world. But you have to come now before midnight. That's when the mirror world locks down for the night. If you miss this chance, you'll be trapped in there forever." Emma grabbed her keys but stopped at the door. In the hallway mirror, she finally saw her reflection again, but it was holding different keys, wearing different clothes, and it was shaking its head violently, mouthing, "Don't go." Emma's phone rang again. "Time's running out, Emma. I can see you hesitating. Don't listen to the reflection. That's not really you. That's the thing that's been pretending to be you. Come to the park and I'll prove which one of us is real." Standing between the mirror and the door, Emma realized the terrifying truth. She had no way of knowing which world was real, which Emma was the original, or whether the voice on the phone was trying to save her or trap her forever. The clock struck 11:59 p.m. Emma had 1 minute to decide which version of reality to trust. Emma's hand trembled on the doorknob as the seconds ticked by. In the mirror, her reflection was now frantically gesturing, pointing at her watch, then at Emma, then making a cutting motion across her throat. The message was clear. Asterisk, "Don't go. It's a trap, asterisk." But the voice on the phone grew more urgent. 30 seconds, Emma. I can feel the barrier strengthening. If you don't come now." Emma made her choice. She turned away from the door and walked toward the mirror. Her reflection smiled with relief and reached out its hand. Emma pressed her palm against the cold glass, and her reflection did the same from the other side. The moment their palms touched, the world shifted. Emma gasped as she found herself standing in what looked like her apartment, but everything was reversed. The furniture was positioned as mirror images of where they should be, text on book spines ran backward, and even her heartbeat seemed to echo from the wrong side of her chest. In the now normal mirror, she saw the woman who had been pretending to be her reflection. This other Emma was banging on the glass, screaming silently, her face twisted with rage. "Thank you," said a voice behind her. Emma turned to see herself, the real Emma, standing in the reversed apartment. "I've been trapped in that mirror world for 3 weeks. She, the real Emma, pointed at the mirror, somehow pulled me through and took my place. I've been trying to get back ever since. But how do I know you're real?" Emma asked, though even as she spoke, she felt the wrongness of this place. Everything felt like an imitation, a hollow copy. "Look at your hands," the real Emma said gently. Emma looked down. Her hands were translucent like glass. She could see through them to the backward carpet beneath her feet. "Mirror people aren't solid," the real Emma explained. "We need to get you back through before midnight, or you'll fade away completely." Emma looked at the clock on the wall. 11:59 p.m. The numbers were backward, but she could still read them. "How?" Emma whispered. "The same way you came through. But this time I'll push from this side while you pull from the other side." They rushed to the mirror. The fake Emma was still there, no longer screaming but watching with calculating eyes. She mouthed something. "She's lying. I'm the real one." Emma pressed her translucent hand against the glass. The fake Emma in the mirror smiled and reached out, but instead of pressing her palm against Emma's, she grabbed Emma's wrist and pulled. "She's trying to trap us both," the real Emma shouted, grabbing Emma from behind. For a moment, Emma was suspended between two worlds, two realities, two versions of herself pulling in opposite directions. The pain was excruciating, like being torn in half. Then the clock struck midnight. The mirror world shattered like glass. Emma found herself standing alone in her real apartment, solid and whole. In the mirror, she saw only her own reflection, normal and obedient. But sometimes, late at night, she could swear she saw two other figures moving in the depths of the glass. Two versions of herself, forever trapped together in a world of reflections, each claiming to be the real Emma. She never learned which one had been telling the truth. But she did learn to avoid mirrors after dark, and she never again lived in an apartment where she couldn't see her reflection clearly in every piece of glass. Because sometimes in the corner of her eye, she could still see them fighting behind the silver surface, and she wondered if one day they might find a way back through. Jessica worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, which meant she was always receiving packages, art supplies, client materials, equipment upgrades. She'd grown accustomed to the steady stream of delivery drivers who came to her door throughout the week. That's why she didn't initially think anything was strange about Marcus. Marcus had been delivering packages to her apartment for about 2 months when she first noticed he lingered longer than other drivers. He'd make small talk about the weather, compliment her apartment's layout when he could see through the doorway, and sometimes ask about her work when he noticed art supplies in the boxes. "You're an artist?" he'd asked one Thursday afternoon, holding a package of premium watercolor paints. "That's so cool. I've always admired creative people." Jessica had smiled politely and signed for the package, but something about the way his eyes scanned her apartment made her uncomfortable. She started being more careful about how wide she opened the door. The next week, Marcus delivered a package she hadn't ordered. The return address showed a local art supply store, and inside were expensive oil paints and brushes, easily $200 worth of supplies. "I think there's been a mistake," Jessica told Marcus when he arrived with another delivery the following day. "Yesterday's package wasn't mine." Marcus looked genuinely confused. The address was correct. Jessica Chen, apartment 4B. "That's you, right?" "Yes, but I didn't order those supplies." "How weird. Sometimes the system glitches." "You can keep them though. Company policy says we can't take back open packages." But Jessica hadn't opened the package. The tape had been carefully cut and resealed so perfectly that she'd initially missed it. Over the next few weeks, more unordered packages arrived. Art books featuring nude figure studies, a high-end easel, professional lighting equipment. All addressed to her, all supposedly system glitches, according to Marcus. Jessica grew suspicious and called the delivery company. According to their records, all the packages had been paid for with cash at various drop-off locations around the city. Someone was specifically sending her these items, and Marcus was the only constant in every delivery. She started refusing packages she hadn't ordered, but Marcus became insistent. "Look, Jessica, I can call you Jessica, right? These packages are paid for. If you don't take them, I'll just have to bring them back tomorrow. And the day after that. Company policy." His smile had changed. It was too wide now, lasting too long. Jessica installed a security camera above her door, disguised as a decorative light fixture. The footage revealed something that made her blood run cold. After completing legitimate deliveries, Marcus would return to her building during his lunch breaks. He had a key to the main entrance, legitimate since he was a regular delivery driver, but instead of leaving after checking for more packages, he would linger in the hallway outside her door. In one clip, Marcus pressed his ear against her door for over 10 minutes, listening. In another, he took photos of her door, the hallway, and the stairwell layout. But the most disturbing footage showed Marcus trying her door handle, gently testing if it was locked. Jessica called the police, but they said they needed more evidence of actual criminal behavior. Loitering in a building he had legitimate access to wasn't enough for charges. The next day, Marcus arrived with a large box addressed to her. "Special delivery," he said, his smile wider than ever. "This one's really special. I picked it out myself." "I'm not accepting any more packages I didn't order," Jessica said firmly, starting to close the door. Marcus wedged his foot in the doorframe. "But this one's different. This one's a gift from someone who really cares about you. Someone who's been watching you create beautiful art and wanted to give you something beautiful in return." Jessica's heart raced. "Who sent it?" "Someone who knows your favorite colors are blue and yellow because that's what you wear most often. Someone who knows you work late on Tuesday nights because your light stays on until 2 a.m. Someone who knows you order Thai food every Friday from that place on Elm Street." Marcus knew details about her life that no delivery driver should know. Details that could only come from careful, prolonged observation. "I'm calling the police," Jessica said, trying to push the door closed. "Go ahead," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But I want you to know something first. I've been delivering to this building for 3 years. I have keys to everywhere, the front door, the basement, the utility rooms." "And Jessica?" He leaned closer. "I know which window in your bedroom doesn't lock properly." Jessica slammed the door and immediately called 911, but when the police arrived 20 minutes later, Marcus was gone. The package sat outside her door with a note taped to it. "For Jessica, from your secret admirer. P.S. Check your bedroom window." With shaking hands, Jessica opened the box. Inside were hundreds of photographs of her, taken through her windows over the past several months. Her working at her computer, cooking dinner, watching TV, sleeping. The photos were organized by date and time with handwritten notes on the back. "Beautiful concentration. Love this peaceful moment. Sweet dreams, Jessica." At the bottom of the box was a newer photo that made her knees buckle. It was a picture of her security camera, taken from inside her apartment. The timestamp showed it had been taken just 2 hours ago, while she'd been out getting groceries. Marcus had been inside her apartment that afternoon. Jessica ran to her bedroom window. It was open, the lock clearly broken. On her nightstand was a delivery receipt for a package she'd never received, signed in her own handwriting she'd never written. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for the spare key you left under the mat. I made copies. Your apartment is beautiful, Jessica. I can't wait to spend more time there with you. P.S. Check tomorrow's delivery schedule. I have the late shift this week. I'll see you after dark." Jessica had never left a spare key under her mat. She packed a bag and left immediately, but as she reached her car, she saw a familiar delivery truck parked across the street. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, no longer bothering to hide. He waved at her and held up a set of keys, her keys. Jessica drove to the police station, but when she looked in her rearview mirror, the delivery truck was following her, maintaining a careful distance. Marcus was no longer just her delivery driver. He was her shadow, armed with legitimate access to buildings throughout the city, keys to places she didn't even know about, and the knowledge that came from months of careful, professional stalking disguised as customer service. The police took her statement, but Jessica realized with growing horror that Marcus would still be working tomorrow, still delivering packages throughout the city, still having legitimate reasons to enter buildings and knock on doors. And she wasn't his only customer. That night, staying in a hotel, Jessica researched Marcus online and found something that made her call the police again. Over the past 2 years, there had been a series of break-ins throughout the city, all targeting single women who lived alone, all occurring during the day when victims were at work. The burglar never took anything valuable, just personal items. Clothing, photos, journals. The only common factor in all the break-ins was that each victim regularly received deliveries. Jessica realized she hadn't been Marcus's first target. She'd just been the first to notice the pattern. And tomorrow he'd be back on his route, delivering packages and selecting his next victim, armed with master keys and the perfect cover story. David had been in and out of hospitals his entire life due to a chronic condition that required regular monitoring and occasional overnight stays. By age 28, he'd grown accustomed to the routine, the sterile smells, the constant beeping of machines, the parade of medical staff who checked on him throughout the night. That's why he initially didn't think anything was unusual about Nurse Patricia. Patricia worked the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, where David had been admitted for his latest flare-up. She was in her 40s, professional, and seemed genuinely caring during her first few visits to his room. She'd check his vitals, adjust his and make pleasant small talk about his job as a software developer. "You work with computers all day? That must be fascinating," she'd said during her 2 a.m. rounds. "I've always been curious about technology, but I'm hopeless with anything more complicated than my smartphone." David had appreciated her friendly demeanor. Most night shift nurses were either exhausted or strictly business, but Patricia seemed interested in him as a person. It was during his second night that David noticed Patricia's visits were becoming more frequent and lasting longer than necessary. She'd come in every hour instead of the standard 2-hour checks, and she'd linger by his bedside, asking detailed questions about his work, his living situation, his family. "Do you live alone?" she'd asked while checking his blood pressure for the 3rd time that night. "That must get lonely, especially when you're dealing with health issues." "I manage fine," David had replied, though something about the way she asked made him uncomfortable. "What about family? Girlfriend?" Patricia continued, her hand resting on his arm longer than medically necessary. "Someone special in your life?" David had deflected the questions, but Patricia's interest seemed to intensify. During subsequent visits, she'd share personal details about her own life, her divorce, her loneliness, her theory that meaningful connections were rare and should be treasured when found. On his 3rd night, David woke up at 4 a.m. to find Patricia sitting in the chair beside his bed, not checking any equipment or taking notes, just watching him sleep. "Oh, you're awake," she said softly. "I was just making sure you were comfortable. You looked like you might be having a bad dream." David hadn't been dreaming, and he was certain he'd been sleeping peacefully. "How long have you been sitting there?" "Just a few minutes," Patricia said, but the chair was pulled close to his bed, and her coat was draped over the back as if she'd settled in for a long stay. "I like watching people sleep. There's something peaceful about it. Innocent." After Patricia left, David requested to speak with the day shift supervisor. He learned something that disturbed him. Patricia had specifically requested to be assigned to his care for the duration of his stay, claiming she had experience with his particular condition. But according to his medical records, his condition was relatively common and didn't require specialized nursing knowledge. David was discharged the following morning, relieved to leave the hospital and Patricia behind. But his relief was short-lived. A week later, David received a friend request on Facebook from Patricia M. Winters. Her profile showed she worked at St. Mary's Hospital, and her photos matched the nurse who'd been caring for him. He declined the request, but within days she'd found him on Instagram, LinkedIn, and even a gaming platform he rarely used. David blocked Patricia on all platforms, but then the phone call started. They came from different numbers: her personal cell, the hospital's main line during her shifts, and numbers he didn't recognize. When he answered, Patricia would claim she was checking up on his recovery, or had forgotten to mention something important about his discharge instructions. "I've been thinking about our conversations," she said during one call. "I feel like we really connected. That doesn't happen often in my line of work. Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. I don't need any follow-up calls." "Of course you don't need them," Patricia replied, her voice taking on a strange tone. "But I want to make them. I want to know you're okay. I want to know what you're doing, who you're with, how you're feeling. Is that so wrong?" David hung up and contacted the hospital's administration. They assured him they'd speak with Patricia about appropriate boundaries with former patients. But the calls continued, now coming from blocked numbers. Patricia's tone grew more intimate, more possessive. She'd referenced things that weren't in his medical records, details about his apartment that she could only know from online research or direct observation. "I hope you're remembering to take your medication at the same time each day," she said during one late-night call. "Consistency is so important. I noticed you have a nice setup by your kitchen window where you keep your pill organizer. That morning light must be lovely." David had never mentioned his kitchen window or pill organizer to anyone at the hospital. Someone had been watching his apartment. He installed security cameras and discovered the terrifying truth. Patricia was driving by his building multiple times each week, sometimes parking across the street for hours. She'd positioned herself where she could see into his ground-floor apartment windows, taking photos with a long-lens camera. But more disturbing was the footage from his building's parking garage. Patricia had gained access somehow and was regularly checking his car. She'd peer through the windows, examine his parking spot for clues about his routine, and on one occasion she'd placed something under his windshield wiper. David found the item the next morning, a note written on hospital stationery. "David, I know you think I'm being inappropriate, but I can't stop thinking about you. I've never felt such a strong connection to a patient. I dream about you every night. I know where you work, where you shop, what you like to eat. I know you better than anyone in your life knows you. We belong together. Patricia. P.S. Your apartment looks lonely. I could make it feel like home." David went to the police, but they explained that Patricia hadn't technically committed any crimes yet. Following someone and taking photos in public spaces wasn't illegal, and her calls, while inappropriate, didn't constitute threats. The situation escalated when David was readmitted to the hospital for a routine procedure. He specifically requested that Patricia not be assigned to his care, but when he woke up from anesthesia, she was there. "Hello, David," Patricia said, adjusting his fore with practiced hands. "I volunteered to take an extra shift so I could make sure you were comfortable. I told the supervisor that we'd built a good rapport during your last stay." David was groggy from the anesthesia but alert enough to feel trapped. He was vulnerable, connected to machines, and Patricia had legitimate medical access to him. "I've missed our talks," Patricia continued, checking his chart with unnecessary thoroughness. "I've learned so much about you since you left. Did you know you order pizza from Tony's every Friday night? Always the same order, pepperoni and mushroom, extra cheese. You're a creature of habit, aren't you?" "How do you know that?" David whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "I pay attention to the people I care about," Patricia said, her smile taking on a disturbing quality. "I know you take the bus to work on Tuesdays because your car is in the shop that day. I know you go grocery shopping on Sunday mornings at exactly 10 a.m. I know you sleep with your bedroom window cracked open because you like fresh air. Patricia leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I know you live alone, David. No roommates, no girlfriend, no family nearby. If something happened to you, how long do you think it would take anyone to notice? David's heart monitor began beeping rapidly as his pulse spiked. Patricia glanced at the screen and smiled. Don't worry, David. I would notice. I'm always watching. I'll always be watching. When David was discharged the next day, he found a letter in his apartment mailbox, written on hospital letterhead. David, I've been reassigned to the cardiac unit, where I'll have access to patient information for the entire hospital system. I'll know every time you visit any medical facility in the city. I'll know about every appointment, every prescription, every health concern. Your medical life is now my medical life. We're connected forever through the system I work in. Get used to seeing me, David. In hospitals, nurses have access to everything. And I do mean everything. Patricia. David realized with growing horror that Patricia wasn't just stalking him. She was using her professional position and access to medical records to monitor his entire life. Every doctor's visit, every prescription, every health emergency would bring him back into her sphere of influence. He was trapped in a system where his stalker held the keys to his most vulnerable moments, where seeking medical care meant placing himself directly in her hands. And there was nothing he could do about it because in the medical system, nurses were trusted professionals, and patients were just temporary visitors to Patricia's permanent world. Riley was obsessed with fitness tracking. She wore a smartwatch that monitored her heart rate, steps, sleep patterns, and even stress levels. She loved analyzing the data, optimizing her workouts, and sharing achievements with her online fitness community. That's why she was initially excited when she started receiving encouraging messages from a fellow fitness enthusiast who went by the username @CardioCoach. The messages began appearing in her fitness apps community section, always timed perfectly with her workouts. When she'd finish a particularly challenging run, @CardioCoach would comment, "Great job pushing through that heart rate spike at mile 3. When she'd have a restless night, he'd message, "Looks like your REM sleep was disrupted. Try chamomile tea before bed." Riley appreciated the detailed feedback. @CardioCoach clearly understood fitness data better than most people in her online community. His advice was always spot on, and his encouragement helped motivate her through difficult training sessions. But gradually, Riley noticed that @CardioCoach's messages were becoming more personal and eerily specific. "Your heart rate pattern suggests you were anxious during today's workout. Everything okay at home?" he'd ask after a day when Riley had indeed been stressed about work. "I noticed your sleep quality improved after you moved your bedtime earlier." "Good choice," he'd comment, though Riley had never mentioned changing her sleep schedule to anyone. The messages were so perfectly timed and so accurate that Riley began to wonder how @CardioCoach could know so much about her biometric data. The fitness app only shared basic workout summaries publicly, not detailed heart rate patterns, sleep stages, or real-time data. Riley checked her app's privacy settings and discovered something alarming. While most of her data was set to private, there was a section she'd never noticed before, advanced coaching access. It was enabled, and according to the fine print, it allowed certified fitness professionals to access detailed biometric data for personalized coaching purposes. She immediately disabled the setting, but @CardioCoach's messages didn't stop. In fact, they became more intrusive. "I see you've changed your privacy settings. That's not necessary, Riley. I'm here to help you reach your fitness goals. Trust is essential in a coaching relationship." The message sent chills down Riley's spine. @CardioCoach had used her real name, though she'd never shared it in the fitness community. Her profile only showed her username and first initial. Riley dug deeper into her app's data sharing agreements and discovered a horrifying truth. The app had been purchased by a data analytics company 6 months earlier, and buried in the updated terms of service was language allowing aggregated health data to be shared with third-party wellness partners for research and coaching purposes. Her detailed biometric data, heart rate patterns, sleep cycles, location data from runs, even stress indicators, was being sold to companies she'd never heard of. But @CardioCoach's access seemed to go beyond what any legitimate coaching service would have. His messages indicated real-time access to her biometric data, as if he were monitoring her constantly. "Your heart rate just spiked. Are you reading this message right now?" appeared on her phone as she researched the app's data policies. Riley's heart was indeed racing as she read the message, and the timestamp showed it had been sent just seconds earlier. Someone was watching her biometric data in real time. Riley contacted the app's customer service, but they insisted that no individual users had access to other users' private data. They suggested that a cardio coach might be using publicly available information combined with fitness expertise to make educated guesses. But Riley knew this was impossible. A cardio coach's messages were too specific, too perfectly timed. The situation escalated when a cardio coach began referencing data that wasn't even tracked by her fitness app. Your stress levels have been elevated for the past 3 days. Is it related to the work project you've been staying late for? The message came with a detailed chart showing her heart rate variability patterns that seemed to correspond exactly with her work stress. Riley had never mentioned her work schedule to anyone in the fitness community, and her fitness app didn't track work-related activities. She realized that a cardio coach wasn't just accessing her fitness app data, he was somehow collecting information from multiple sources and correlating it with her biometric patterns. Riley hired a cybersecurity consultant who discovered the terrifying scope of the data breach. Her fitness app was syncing with her smartphone's health data, which included information from other apps. Her calendar, explaining how a cardio coach knew about work stress. Her sleep tracking app, providing detailed sleep analysis. Her meditation app, showing stress management attempts. And even her menstrual cycle tracking app. But more disturbing was the discovery that someone had gained administrative access to her personal fitness data account. A cardio coach wasn't just a user of the fitness app. He was accessing her data directly through the app's back-end systems. The cybersecurity consultant found evidence that someone with advanced technical skills had created a custom dashboard that pulled Riley's data from multiple health and fitness apps, creating a comprehensive biological profile that updated in real time. Whoever is doing this knows when you're awake, when you're asleep, when you're stressed, when you're relaxed, when you're home, when you're exercising, even when you're having hormonal fluctuations, the consultant explained. They have a minute-by-minute biological map of your life. Riley stopped using all fitness tracking apps and devices, but the messages from a cardio coach continued, now coming through email and social media. I see you stopped wearing your fitness tracker. That's disappointing, Riley. I was enjoying our connection. But don't worry, I have months of your biometric data stored. I know your patterns better than you know them yourself. The email included attachments that made Riley's blood run cold. Detailed charts showing her heart rate patterns during what appeared to be intimate moments, sleep data that revealed exactly when she was most vulnerable, and stress analysis that pinpointed her emotional breaking points. I know when you're scared, Riley. Your heart rate spikes to exactly 142 BPM, and your sleep becomes fragmented. I know when you're happy. Your resting heart rate drops to 58 BPM, and your HRV increases. I know when you're aroused, when you're angry, when you're sad. I know your body better than any lover ever could. The email continued, I've been studying you for 8 months. I know that your heart rate is probably around 160 right now as you read this. I know you'll have trouble sleeping tonight. Your stress patterns predict insomnia when you're anxious. I know you'll check your locks twice before bed and sleep with your phone nearby. I know because your body tells me everything. Riley checked her heart rate manually. It was 159 BPM. That night, Riley did exactly what a cardio coach had predicted. Checked her locks twice, kept her phone nearby, and lay awake for hours. She realized with growing horror that her stalker didn't need to see her to know her intimate details. He had 8 months of biometric data that revealed her body's responses to every emotion, every situation, every fear. He knew her better than she knew herself, and he would always know because the data was permanent, stored somewhere in systems she couldn't access or control. The next morning, Riley found a final message from a cardio coach. Your biometric patterns indicate you didn't sleep well. As predicted. I'll always know how you're feeling, Riley, because your body can't lie to me. Even if you never wear another fitness tracker, I have enough data to predict your responses to any situation. I own your biological patterns now. And patterns don't change easily. Riley realized that her obsession with tracking her own body had allowed someone else to track it better than she ever could. Her stalker hadn't just invaded her digital privacy. He'd colonized her biological responses, turning her own body into a surveillance system she could never escape from. Because as long as her heart beat, her stalker would know exactly how fast. Christine had always been security conscious, especially after moving into her new house in a neighborhood that had experienced a few break-ins. So when Derek from Secure Home Solutions called offering a free security assessment, she was interested. Derek arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a professional uniform, driving a company van filled with security equipment. He was knowledgeable, friendly, and thorough in his assessment of her home's vulnerabilities. Your back door is your weakest point. Derek explained, examining the lock. "And these ground floor windows would be easy for someone to jimmy open. You're living alone, right? That makes you a target for opportunistic criminals." Christine appreciated Derek's expertise. He pointed out security flaws she'd never considered. Sight lines from the street, landscape features that could provide cover for intruders, and the importance of varied lighting patterns to suggest occupancy when she was away. "I'd recommend our premium system," Derek said, showing her a detailed proposal. "Motion sensors, door/window contacts, cameras, and 24/7 monitoring. With your permission, I'll do a complete security audit, test all entry points, check your current locks, analyze your daily routines to identify patterns that criminals might exploit." The price was steep, so Christine asked for time to consider. Derek was understanding but insistent about the urgency. "I've seen too many break-ins in this area," he said. "Criminals are getting bolder. They watch houses for weeks, learning occupant schedules. The longer you wait, the more vulnerable you become." Derek left his business card and a detailed security report highlighting every vulnerability he'd identified. Christine was impressed by the thoroughness, but something about Derek's assessment bothered her. He'd made several comments about her personal routines that seemed overly specific. "You leave for work every morning at 8:15, he'd noted. "And you return around 6:30, always parking in the same spot. Criminals notice patterns like that." Christine hadn't mentioned her work schedule to Derek, and she wasn't sure how he'd know her exact departure and arrival times from a single afternoon visit. Over the next week, Derek called daily to follow up on the security proposal. During these calls, he'd reference new observations about her neighborhood and home. "I drove by yesterday evening to check something, and I noticed your bedroom light stays on until about 11 p.m. That's good for security, but you should vary the timing. Criminals count on predictability. I saw you got a delivery yesterday while you were at work. Package theft is common in this area. A security system would alert you to deliveries immediately." Derek's observations were becoming uncomfortably detailed. He seemed to know her daily routine better than she did. Christine declined Derek's security system but thanked him for the assessment. Derek's tone changed immediately. "That's a mistake, Christine. I've been monitoring your neighborhood and the criminal activity is increasing. Just last night, I saw someone suspicious checking out your property." "What do you mean monitoring?" Christine asked. "Part of our service is neighborhood surveillance. We keep an eye on potential clients' properties to document security threats. It's all legal, public streets, you know." Christine felt uneasy but ended the call politely. However, Derek's calls continued, now focusing on security incidents he'd witnessed near her home. "Someone was in your backyard last night around 2 a.m. I got it on camera. You really need to see this footage, Christine. Can I come over tonight to show you?" Christine refused, but Derek's calls became more frequent and urgent. "The suspicious activity is escalating. I've documented multiple incidents of someone casing your house. As a security professional, I can't ignore this threat to your safety." Feeling genuinely concerned, Christine asked Derek to email her the footage he'd mentioned. Derek claimed the files were too large for email and insisted on an in-person meeting. Christine contacted Secure Home Solutions directly and learned something that chilled her to the bone. Derek had been fired from the company 3 weeks earlier for inappropriate client interactions and unauthorized surveillance activities. The Derek who'd been calling her, monitoring her neighborhood, and documenting security threats was no longer a legitimate security professional. Christine immediately called the police, who investigated Derek's claims about suspicious activity around her property. They found no evidence of any criminal behavior in her neighborhood, but they did find evidence of Derek's surveillance. Hidden cameras were discovered in trees across from her house, positioned to monitor her driveway, front door, and several windows. The cameras were connected to wireless transmitters that sent footage to a remote location. Derek had been conducting unauthorized surveillance on Christine for over a month, documenting her daily routines under the guise of professional security monitoring. But the most disturbing discovery came when police searched Derek's apartment. They found detailed files on dozens of women who'd received free security assessments from Derek over the past 2 years. Each file contained floor plans, daily schedules, security vulnerabilities, and extensive surveillance footage. Derek had been using his legitimate position as a security consultant to gain access to women's homes, identify their vulnerabilities, and then conduct long-term surveillance disguised as professional monitoring. His apartment contained equipment for picking locks, bypassing alarm systems, and conducting covert surveillance. Derek wasn't just a stalker, He was a predator who used security expertise to make women feel vulnerable, then positioned himself as their protector while secretly victimizing them. The police discovered that Derek's security assessments were actually detailed plans for future break-ins. He would identify each home's weaknesses, learn the occupant's schedule, and then return later as a burglar, armed with intimate knowledge of the property's layout and security measures. But for some women, Derek's interest went beyond burglary. Christine's file was marked long-term monitoring and contained notes about her personal habits, work schedule, and social connections. Derek had been building a comprehensive profile of her life, apparently planning something more extensive than a simple break-in. He knew when you were home, when you were vulnerable, and exactly how to get inside your house, the investigating detective explained. He'd been preparing for months. When Derek was arrested, police found him in a van parked outside another woman's house, conducting a security assessment on his next victim. His equipment included lockpicking tools, surveillance cameras, and detailed floor plans of the woman's home that he'd sketched during his initial visit. Christine realized that Derek's entire business model was predatory. He used the promise of security to gain access to women's homes and lives, then exploited the vulnerabilities he was supposedly protecting them from. The most terrifying part was how legitimate Derek had seemed. His knowledge of security systems was real, his professional demeanor was convincing, and his warnings about criminal activity felt genuine, because he was the criminal he was warning them about. Christine's case led to the discovery of Derek's victims throughout the city. Dozens of women who'd received free security assessments and then experienced break-ins, stalking, or harassment. Derek had been using security expertise to terrorize the very people who trusted him to keep them safe. The investigation revealed that Derek had been fired from multiple security companies over the years for similar behavior, but he'd continued operating independently, using stolen company credentials and fake business cards to maintain his cover. Christine's ordeal ended with Derek's arrest, but she learned a disturbing truth about the security industry. The people you trust to protect you from predators sometimes are the predators, armed with professional knowledge of exactly how to exploit your vulnerabilities. She eventually did install a security system from a different company after extensive background checks, but she never again felt completely safe in her own home, knowing that somewhere out there might be another Derek, using the promise of protection as a weapon. Zoe was a micro-influencer with about 15,000 followers on Instagram. She posted about lifestyle, fashion, and travel, and had recently started making enough money from sponsorships to consider social media her part-time job. When she received a DM from Alex Chin, who claimed to be a social media manager offering his services for free to build his portfolio, she was intrigued. Alex's profile looked legitimate: professional headshots, testimonials from other influencers, and a portfolio of successful campaigns. He offered to manage her content strategy, grow her following, and connect her with better sponsorship opportunities. "I've been following your content for a while," Alex wrote. "You have great instincts, but with proper management we could triple your engagement within 3 months. I'm offering my services free for the first 90 days to prove my value." Zoe was hesitant about giving a stranger access to her social media accounts, but Alex was persuasive and professional. He provided references, a detailed strategy document, and offered to start with limited access, just scheduling posts and analyzing metrics. "I'll need access to your Instagram business account to see detailed analytics," Alex explained during their first video call. "And eventually posting privileges so I can maintain consistent content while you focus on creating. But we'll start slow and build trust." Alex seemed knowledgeable about social media marketing, and his references checked out when Zoe contacted them. She decided to give him limited access to her Instagram account. Within a week, Alex had transformed Zoe's social media presence. Her engagement rates doubled, her follower count increased significantly, and she received inquiries from several major brands interested in partnerships. "You're a natural at this," Alex told her during their weekly strategy call. "I think we should expand to other platforms. TikTok, Twitter, maybe even YouTube. I can manage everything: posting, responding to comments, DMs, brand negotiations. You just focus on being your authentic self." Impressed by the results, Zoe gradually gave Alex more access to her accounts. He was posting on her behalf, responding to comments as if he were her, and managing all her business communications. But as Alex gained more control over her online presence, Zoe noticed strange patterns in her social media activity. Alex would post photos Zoe didn't remember taking, pictures that seemed to be from her phone's camera roll, but shots she didn't recall posing for. When she asked about them, Alex claimed they were candid shots, that tested better with her audience than posed photos. Authenticity is trending, Alex explained. I've been selecting more natural, unfiltered moments from your photo library. Your followers love seeing the real you. But some of the candid shots were taken in her apartment during times when Zoe was certain she hadn't been taking selfies. The angles and timing suggested someone else had been taking photos of her without her knowledge. Zoe checked her phone's location data and discovered something chilling. According to the metadata, many of the mysterious photos were taken when her phone's location services showed she was at home, but the timestamp indicated she had been at work or out with friends. Her blood ran cold as she realized the implications. Someone had been in her apartment, using her phone to take photos of her living space and personal belongings. She immediately changed all her social media passwords and called Alex, but his number was disconnected. When she tried to contact the references he had provided, she discovered they were fake profiles with stolen photos. Panicking, Zoe contacted the police and a cybersecurity expert. The investigation revealed that Alex Chin was actually Marcus Webb, a convicted stalker who had been targeting young female influencers for months. He had created an elaborate fake identity, complete with fabricated testimonials and a professional website. Marcus had used malware hidden in the analytics tools he had asked Zoe to install on her phone. This software gave him remote access to her camera, microphone, and photo library. He had been secretly photographing her in her own home and using those images to build a more authentic social media presence that attracted more followers and brand deals. The cybersecurity expert discovered that Marcus had been selling access to Zoe's private photos and personal information on the dark web. He had also been using her growing influence to promote products from companies that paid him directly, pocketing the money that should have gone to Zoe. Most disturbing of all, Marcus had been gradually isolating Zoe from her real relationships by responding to her DMs and comments in ways that drove away friends and potential romantic interests. He was systematically taking control of not just her online presence, but her entire social life. The investigation led to Marcus's arrest, but the damage to Zoe's privacy and sense of security was profound. She had to completely rebuild her online presence, install new security systems in her home, and undergo therapy to deal with the trauma of being stalked and manipulated for months without knowing it. I thought I was being smart by starting with limited access and building trust gradually, Zoe later reflected in a cautionary post to her followers. But predators are patient. They're willing to invest months building credibility to gain access to their victims. The results he delivered were real, which made it impossible to see the danger until it was too late. The case highlighted how social media influencers, particularly young women, are vulnerable to sophisticated digital stalking schemes. Marcus had exploited Zoe's ambition and the pressure to grow her online presence, using her own success against her. Zoe eventually rebuilt her social media career, but with much stricter security measures and a hard-earned understanding that in the digital age, the people who promise to help you succeed online may have the most to gain from your vulnerability. The story serves as a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, giving someone access to your digital life is tantamount to giving them access to your physical world, and some people will exploit that access in ways that are both profitable and deeply invasive. Natalie worked late shifts at a downtown marketing firm and relied heavily on rideshare apps to get home safely. Living in a city where parking was expensive and public transportation unreliable after 10 p.m., apps like Uber and Lyft had become her lifeline. That's why she initially felt grateful when she started getting the same driver regularly, Kevin, a soft-spoken man in his 30s who drove a pristine silver Honda Accord. He always arrived quickly, kept the car clean, and made polite conversation during the 15-minute ride to her apartment. "Working late again?" Kevin would ask as Natalie settled into the back seat. "You're dedicated. Your company is lucky to have someone so committed." Kevin seemed genuinely interested in her career, asking thoughtful questions about her projects and remembering details from previous conversations. Unlike many rideshare drivers who barely acknowledged their passengers, Kevin made the late-night rides feel safer and more personal. After a month of regular rides with Kevin, Natalie began to notice how convenient it was that he always seemed to be nearby when she needed a ride. No matter what time she finished work, whether it was 9 p.m. or midnight, Kevin would accept her ride request within seconds and arrive in under 3 minutes. "You must work this area a lot," Natalie mentioned one evening. "I go where the demand is," Kevin replied with a smile. "And you're one of my most reliable customers. I've learned your schedule pretty well." At first, Natalie appreciated Kevin's reliability. In a city where surge pricing could make late-night rides prohibitively expensive, Kevin's immediate availability was a blessing. But gradually, she began to feel uneasy about how perfectly Kevin anticipated her needs. One Thursday night, Natalie's work meeting ended earlier than expected, and she decided to walk to a nearby restaurant for dinner before heading home. As she waited for her food, she noticed a familiar silver Honda Accord parked across the street. Kevin was sitting in the driver's seat, looking at his phone. When Natalie waved, Kevin seemed startled but then smiled and waved back. He drove away quickly, leaving Natalie with an uncomfortable feeling that he'd been watching the restaurant, waiting for her to finish eating. The next week, Natalie experimented with taking different routes home, sometimes stopping at a coffee shop or walking to a different pickup location. But Kevin always seemed to know where to find her. No matter where she requested a ride, he would arrive from the direction that suggested he'd been nearby, waiting. Natalie checked the rideshare app's driver tracking feature and discovered something disturbing. According to the app, Kevin was always within a 3-block radius of her location when she requested rides. For a driver who supposedly worked throughout the city, Kevin's positioning seemed suspiciously focused on her neighborhood and workplace. She began taking screenshots of Kevin's location before requesting rides and noticed a pattern. Kevin would appear to be stationary for long periods in areas where Natalie frequently went. Near her office building, outside her favorite lunch spots, in the parking lot of her grocery store. The situation escalated when Natalie decided to take a different rideshare service one evening. As she waited for her Lyft driver, Kevin's Honda Accord pulled up next to her. "Hey Natalie," Kevin called through his passenger window. "Need a ride? I saw you standing here and thought your ride might have canceled." "I have a driver coming," Natalie replied, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. "Are you sure? I'm here now and I know you prefer riding with familiar drivers. Plus, I won't charge you surge pricing." Kevin's insistence was unsettling, especially since Natalie had never mentioned preferring familiar drivers. When her Lyft arrived, Kevin watched from his car as she got in, following the vehicle for several blocks before turning off. Natalie reported the incident to the rideshare company, but they explained that drivers were allowed to offer rides to customers they recognized, as long as the transactions went through the app. Since Kevin hadn't actually provided an unauthorized ride, there was no policy violation. But Kevin's behavior became increasingly intrusive. He started sending messages through the app's communication system, initially appearing to be routine driver-passenger interactions but gradually becoming more personal. "Hope you enjoyed dinner at Bistro Luna last night. I drove by and saw you in the window. You looked happy. Smiley face. Noticed you've been working later this week. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. The city can be dangerous for young women alone. Saw you at the grocery store earlier. You forgot to buy milk. I noticed your shopping list fell out of your purse when you got in my car last Tuesday." The messages revealed that Kevin had been watching Natalie far beyond their scheduled rides. He was tracking her daily activities, noting her habits, and somehow accessing personal information like her shopping lists. Natalie hired a private investigator who discovered the terrifying scope of Kevin's surveillance. Using the rideshare app's driver mode, Kevin had been creating fake ride requests to track Natalie's location data. He would cancel these requests before pickup, but not before obtaining her exact coordinates and destination information. The app's algorithm, designed to optimize driver efficiency, had learned that Kevin was frequently near Natalie's locations and began preferentially assigning him to her rides. Kevin had essentially gamed the system to become Natalie's primary driver while maintaining the appearance of coincidental matching. But Kevin's access went deeper than location tracking. The investigator found evidence that Kevin had installed tracking devices on Natalie's car during times when she'd left it in overnight parking while taking rideshares home. He had been monitoring her movements even when she wasn't using the app. Most disturbing was the discovery of Kevin's detailed logs, kept in a notebook found in his car during a police search. He had documented every ride, every conversation, every personal detail Natalie had shared, creating a comprehensive profile of her life, relationships, and vulnerabilities. The notebook contained plans for transitioning to a more direct relationship, including Kevin's strategy for inserting himself into Natalie's social circle through chance encounters at locations he knew she frequented. "She trusts me with her safety every night," one entry read. "She depends on me. She just doesn't realize yet that this dependency should extend to all areas of her life." Kevin had been using his position as Natalie's trusted transportation provider to systematically invade every aspect of her privacy. He knew where she worked, lived, shopped, ate, and socialized. He had become the invisible constant in her daily routine, using her own need for safe transportation against her. When police arrested Kevin, they found GPS tracking data showing he had been following Natalie's car during daytime hours, photographing her at various locations, and maintaining detailed surveillance logs that extended back over 6 months, 3 months before Natalie had even started using rideshare services regularly. Kevin had selected Natalie as a target by observing her routine and then positioned himself to become her regular driver, creating the illusion of convenience while actually orchestrating elaborate surveillance disguised as customer service. The case revealed how rideshare apps, designed to provide safety and convenience, could be exploited by predators who understood how to manipulate both the technology and the trust relationship between drivers and passengers. Natalie eventually moved to a different city, but she never again felt safe getting into a car with a stranger, knowing that the person behind the wheel might not be a driver at all, but a predator who had turned her need for transportation into an opportunity for stalking. The rideshare company implemented new safety measures following Kevin's arrest, but Natalie realized that in the gig economy, the line between service provider and stalker could be invisibly thin, and customers might never know which side of that line their driver was on until it was too late. Amy had always struggled with motivation to exercise until she joined FitLife Gym and met Jake, a charismatic personal trainer who specialized in working with beginners. Jake's approach was encouraging rather than intimidating, and his training methods helped Amy build confidence along with strength. Fitness is about more than just physical transformation, Jake would say during their sessions. It's about building mental resilience, establishing discipline, and creating a lifestyle that supports your goals. I'm here to guide you through every aspect of that journey. Jake's training philosophy extended beyond the gym. He provided nutrition advice, sleep optimization tips, and even guidance on stress management. Amy appreciated his holistic approach and felt like she finally had a fitness mentor who understood her struggles. During their 3rd week of training, Jake suggested they meet for a consultation at a local coffee shop to discuss Amy's long-term fitness goals. The session was productive, with Jake creating a comprehensive 6-month plan that included detailed dietary guidelines, workout progressions, and lifestyle modifications. "I want to be more than just your trainer," Jake explained. "I want to be your accountability partner, your support system, your guide to becoming the best version of yourself. That means being available when you need motivation, guidance, or just someone who understands your fitness journey." Jake gave Amy his personal phone number and encouraged her to text him daily updates about her workouts, meals, and how she was feeling physically and emotionally. Initially, Amy found this level of support motivating and appreciated having someone invested in her success. But Jake's involvement in Amy's life began to extend beyond fitness coaching. "I noticed you mentioned feeling tired yesterday," Jake texted one morning. "Did you go to bed late? I drove by your apartment around 11 p.m. and your lights were still on. Consistent sleep is crucial for recovery." Amy felt uncomfortable that Jake had been in her neighborhood, but he explained it away as coincidence. He lived nearby and had noticed her apartment lights during his evening run. Jake's texts became more frequent and more personal. He wanted to know about Amy's work stress, her social activities, and her relationships, claiming that all these factors affected her fitness progress. "Emotional wellness is directly connected to physical wellness," Jake insisted. "If you're dealing with relationship drama or work stress, it impacts your cortisol levels, your sleep quality, your motivation to exercise. I need to understand your whole life to be an effective trainer." Amy began receiving nutrition advice that was suspiciously specific to meals she hadn't mentioned to Jake. He would text suggestions for managing post-lunch energy crashes on days when Amy had eaten particular foods, or remind her about hydration after she'd had wine with dinner, meals and drinks she'd never discussed with him. When Amy questioned how Jake knew about her dietary choices, he claimed he was making educated guesses based on her energy levels during workouts and her general descriptions of her eating habits. "After 3 months of training together, I can read your body language and energy patterns," Jake explained. "When you come in sluggish, I can usually guess what you ate the night before. It's part of being a good trainer." But Jake's knowledge became too specific to be guesswork. He knew when Amy had ordered takeout, when she'd skipped meals, and even when she'd had coffee late in the day, details that would be impossible to deduce from workout performance alone. Amy decided to test Jake's claims by keeping a detailed food log and comparing it to his educated guesses about her diet. The correlation was perfect. Jake knew exactly what she was eating when she was eating it, and often commented on her food choices before she'd even finished meals. Growing suspicious, Amy hired a private investigator who discovered that Jake had been systematically stalking his female clients for years. He used his position as a personal trainer to gather personal information, then conducted surveillance disguised as lifestyle coaching. The investigator found that Jake had installed tracking apps on clients' phones during training sessions, claiming he was helping them download fitness apps or showing them exercise videos. These apps secretly transmitted location data, text messages, and even photos to Jake's personal devices. Jake's surveillance extended to social media monitoring, where he created fake profiles to follow his clients and their friends, gathering information about their social lives, relationships, and daily routines. He used this information to appear more knowledgeable about their lives and to create the illusion of being a highly intuitive trainer. But the most disturbing discovery was Jake's collection of hidden camera footage from the gym's private training rooms. He had installed miniature cameras that recorded clients during personal training sessions, capturing not just their workouts but also their conversations, their vulnerabilities, and their changing clothes. Jake had been using his trusted position as a fitness professional to exploit women who were already vulnerable about their bodies and self-esteem. He targeted clients who were beginners, knowing they would be more likely to appreciate his attention and less likely to question his methods. The investigator found evidence that Jake had been selling access to his clients' personal information and private footage on underground websites. He was literally profiting from the trust and vulnerability of women who thought they were paying for fitness guidance. Amy's case led to a police investigation that uncovered Jake's victims throughout the city. Dozens of women who had trained with Jake reported similar experiences, unusually personal attention that had made them feel special, followed by increasingly intrusive monitoring of their lives outside the gym. Many victims described feeling like Jake knew them better than they knew themselves, attributing his insights to professional expertise rather than recognizing them as evidence of stalking and surveillance. "He made me feel like I was his most important client," one victim told police. "He seemed to care about every aspect of my life. I thought that's what good personal trainers did. I didn't realize he was studying me like a specimen." The police found Jake's detailed files on over 200 women, including photos, personal information, fitness progress charts, and psychological profiles that noted each woman's insecurities, relationship status, and emotional vulnerabilities. Jake had been using fitness training as a cover for systematic predatory behavior, exploiting the intimate nature of personal training to gain access to women's bodies, personal information, and psychological weaknesses. When arrested, Jake was found to have equipment for conducting sophisticated surveillance: GPS trackers, hidden cameras, phone hacking software, and social media monitoring tools. His apartment contained a wall of monitors displaying live feeds from various locations where his clients lived and worked. The case revealed how personal trainers, who often work one-on-one with clients in private settings, could exploit the inherent vulnerability of the trainer-client relationship. Women seeking to improve their fitness and self-esteem had instead become targets for elaborate stalking schemes disguised as professional coaching. Amy eventually found a new gym and a female trainer, but the experience left her with lasting trauma and a deep distrust of fitness professionals. She realized that Jake had weaponized her desire for self-improvement, using her fitness goals as a tool to gain access to her most private moments and personal insecurities. The gym industry implemented stricter background checks and surveillance protocols following Jake's arrest, but Amy learned that predators often choose professions that provide access to vulnerable people, and the line between professional care and personal exploitation can be manipulated by those who understand how to exploit trust. Sarah worked remotely as a freelance graphic designer, which meant her computer was her lifeline to both work and social connections. When her laptop started experiencing mysterious glitches and performance issues, she was grateful when her internet service provider's tech support team offered comprehensive remote assistance. The technician who contacted her, David, seemed knowledgeable and patient. He explained that he would need remote access to her computer to diagnose and fix the complex software conflicts that were causing her problems. "I can see you use your computer for both personal and professional work," David said during their first remote session. "I'll make sure to be respectful of your privacy while I troubleshoot these issues. Just minimize any personal windows and I'll focus on the technical problems." David's remote session lasted 2 hours, during which he seemed to fix most of Sarah's computer problems. Her laptop ran faster, the mysterious crashes stopped, and several annoying pop-ups disappeared. Sarah was impressed by David's expertise and grateful for the thorough service. "I've installed some optimization software that will help prevent these issues in the future," David explained. "It runs in the background so you won't notice it, but it monitors your system health and performs automatic maintenance. If you have any more problems, just call this direct number and I'll take care of you personally." Over the next few weeks, Sarah's computer performed better than it had in months. She occasionally noticed brief moments when her cursor would move on its own or windows would minimize without her input, but these glitches were minor compared to the problems she'd experienced before David's help. David called periodically to check on her computer's performance and offer additional optimization services. During these calls, he would make casual comments that seemed to indicate unusually detailed knowledge about Sarah's computer usage. "I see you've been working on a lot of late-night projects lately," David mentioned during one call. "The timestamps on your recent file saves show you're staying up past midnight pretty regularly. Make sure you're not overworking yourself." Sarah found it odd that David could see her file save times, but she assumed this information was part of the monitoring software he'd installed. "Your computer's been running smoothly, but I noticed you've been visiting some questionable websites that could be security risks," David said during another call. "Nothing malicious, just sites that don't have proper SSL certificates. I can install additional security software to protect you." Sarah couldn't remember visiting any questionable websites, but she trusted David's expertise and agreed to the additional security measures. Gradually, David's comments became more specific and more personal. "I see you've been video chatting with family quite a bit this week. That's nice that you stay in touch. The camera usage logs show some long conversations. Your email activity suggests you might be stressed about a client project. I noticed you've been sending and receiving a lot of messages with urgent subject lines." Sarah began to feel uncomfortable about how much David seemed to know about her computer usage, but when she asked about the monitoring software, David assured her that all technicians could access basic system logs to ensure optimal performance. The situation escalated when David called with a security alert. "Sarah, I'm seeing some concerning activity on your computer. Someone may be trying to hack into your accounts. I can see login attempts from unfamiliar locations, and there's suspicious network traffic. I need to do an emergency security scan." Worried about her client data and personal information, Sarah agreed to another remote session. David spent over an hour on her computer, claiming to remove malware and strengthen her security settings. But during this session, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. While David was supposedly scanning for malware, she saw him open her photo folder and browse through personal images, including private photos she'd never shared with anyone. "What are you doing in my photo folder?" Sarah demanded. "I'm checking for image-based malware," David replied quickly. "Some viruses hide in photo files. I'm just scanning for threats." But Sarah had seen David pause on specific photos, particularly ones of her in casual clothing around her home. His scanning looked more like browsing. After the session ended, Sarah immediately called her internet service provider to complain about David's behavior. She learned something terrifying. David was not an employee of her ISP. In fact, her internet service provider had no record of any tech support calls to her number. The real David Mitchell had left the company 6 months earlier, but someone had been using his credentials and identity to contact customers and gain access to their computers. Sarah contacted the police and a cybersecurity expert who discovered the full extent of her digital violation. The optimization software David had installed was actually sophisticated spyware that gave him complete control over her computer. David had been monitoring every keystroke, reading every email, watching through her webcam, and accessing every file on her computer for over 2 months. He had her passwords, her client information, her personal photos, and recordings of her private video calls. The cybersecurity expert found evidence that David had been using Sarah's computer as a gateway to hack into her social media accounts, her email, her cloud storage, and even her online banking. He had access to her entire digital life. But the violation went beyond just data theft. David had been using his access to manipulate Sarah's online presence. He had been reading her private messages and using that information to sabotage her relationships by sending inflammatory emails that appeared to come from Sarah's accounts. "He was essentially living inside your computer," the cybersecurity expert explained. "He could see everything you did, access everything you owned digitally, and even control your computer remotely. He was watching you through your webcam, listening through your microphone, and probably had more access to your life than you did." The investigation revealed that David was part of a larger criminal network that targeted remote workers, particularly women who worked from home alone. They used social engineering to gain trust, then installed comprehensive surveillance software disguised as legitimate tech support. Police found David's operation in a basement apartment filled with monitors showing live feeds from dozens of victims' computers. He had been simultaneously stalking multiple women, monitoring their daily routines, their work schedules, their personal relationships, and their private moments. David's files contained detailed profiles of each victim, including their vulnerabilities, their daily routines, their financial information, and their personal secrets. He had been selling this information to other criminals while also using it for personal gratification and control. The most disturbing discovery was David's collection of recorded video calls, private photos, and intimate moments captured through victims' webcams. He had been creating and distributing unauthorized recordings of women in their most private moments. "I thought I was getting tech support," Sarah told investigators. "Instead, I was being digitally kidnapped. He had more access to my life than I did. He could see everything, control everything, know everything about me while I went about my daily routine completely unaware." David's arrest led to the discovery of over 300 victims across multiple states. Many women reported similar experiences, computer problems that led to helpful tech support, followed by months or years of digital stalking disguised as system maintenance. The case highlighted how remote work, while offering freedom and flexibility, also created new vulnerabilities for criminals who understood how to exploit trust and technical ignorance. Sarah had to completely rebuild her digital life. New computer, new accounts, new passwords, new security measures. But she never again felt completely safe working from home, knowing that someone with the right technical skills could potentially be watching her through her own computer screen. The tech support industry implemented stricter verification protocols following David's arrest. But Sarah learned that in the digital age, the people who promise to fix your computer problems might actually be the biggest threat to your digital security and personal privacy. Lisa moved to Maplewood Heights specifically because it was known as one of the safest neighborhoods in the city. The community had an active neighborhood watch program, well-maintained streets, and residents who looked out for each other. As a single woman living alone, Lisa felt secure knowing her neighbors were vigilant about security. Captain Robert Hayes, the neighborhood watch coordinator, introduced himself within a week of Lisa's arrival. Robert was a retired security guard in his 50s who had been organizing community safety efforts for over 3 years. He was knowledgeable, friendly, and seemed genuinely committed to keeping the neighborhood safe. "Welcome to Maplewood Heights," Robert said when he knocked on Lisa's door with a welcome packet. "I like to meet all the new residents personally and make sure they understand our community safety protocols. We've worked hard to maintain our reputation as the safest neighborhood in the city." Robert's welcome packet included emergency contact numbers, information about the neighborhood watch program, and detailed safety guidelines. He explained the community's communication system, a private Facebook group and text alert network that kept residents informed about suspicious activities, safety concerns, and community events. "We encourage all residents to report anything unusual," Robert explained. "Strange vehicles, unfamiliar people, unusual noises, changes in neighbors' routines. The more eyes and ears we have watching out for each other, the safer everyone stays." Lisa appreciated the community's commitment to safety and joined both the Facebook group and the text alert system. She found the neighborhood watch communications informative and reassuring. Residents regularly shared updates about package deliveries, vacation house sitting arrangements, and minor security concerns. Robert was particularly active in the community communications, often sharing detailed observations about neighborhood activities and reminding residents about safety protocols. His messages were always professional and focused on community security. But after living in the neighborhood for a month, Lisa began to notice that Robert's observations were unusually detailed and specifically focused on her activities. "New resident on Elm Street has established a consistent routine," Robert posted in the Facebook group. "Leaves for work at 8:15 a.m., returns around 6:30 p.m., usually parks in the same spot. Good to see predictable patterns that help us identify when something might be unusual." While Robert didn't mention Lisa by name, she was the only new resident on Elm Street, and his description of her routine was unerringly accurate. Robert's posts continued to reference the new Elm Street resident, with increasing specificity. Elm Street resident received a large delivery yesterday evening. Driver had difficulty finding the address, walked around the property for several minutes. Reminded me that we should make sure our house numbers are clearly visible for legitimate deliveries. Noticed Elm Street resident had a guest vehicle parked overnight last weekend. Appeared to be a friend rather than a romantic partner based on the interaction I observed. Good to see residents building social connections in the neighborhood. Lisa felt uncomfortable that Robert was monitoring her visitors and making assumptions about her personal relationships, but she initially dismissed it as overly enthusiastic community watchfulness. The situation escalated when Robert started sending Lisa private messages through the neighborhood watch system. "Lisa, I noticed your bedroom light stayed on quite late last night. Everything okay? Sometimes insomnia can be a sign of stress or security concerns. I'm here if you need to discuss any safety worries. Saw you had some issues with your garbage disposal yesterday, heard the repair truck and noticed you talking to the technician for quite a while. If you need recommendations for reliable service providers, I maintain a list of vetted contractors who work in our neighborhood. Robert's messages revealed that he was conducting far more detailed surveillance of Lisa's activities than would be normal for a neighborhood watch coordinator. He seemed to know when she had maintenance issues, when she couldn't sleep, and who visited her home. Lisa decided to test the extent of Robert's monitoring by varying her routine and noting whether he would comment on the changes. The results were disturbing. When Lisa left work early one day, Robert sent a message within hours. "Hope everything's okay. Noticed you arrived home much earlier than usual. If there are any work-related safety concerns, I'm happy to discuss security measures." When Lisa had dinner with a friend at a restaurant across town, Robert messaged the next day, "Noticed your car wasn't in its usual spot last night. Good to see you're getting out and exploring the city." Social connections are important for mental health and community integration. Robert's knowledge of Lisa's activities extended far beyond what he could observe from casual neighborhood watching. He seemed to know when she left the neighborhood, how long she was gone, and sometimes even where she had been. Lisa installed security cameras around her property and discovered something that chilled her to the bone. Robert was conducting regular surveillance of her home, walking by multiple times per day, taking photos of her property, and documenting her activities in a notebook. The camera footage showed Robert approaching her windows at night, testing her door handles when she wasn't home, and even going through her garbage to collect personal information. But most disturbing was footage of Robert installing something near her electrical meter, a small device that turned out to be a listening device capable of transmitting conversations from inside her house. Lisa contacted the police, who investigated Robert's activities and made a shocking discovery. Robert was not actually the legitimate neighborhood watch coordinator. The real coordinator had moved away 8 months earlier, and Robert had simply assumed the role without any official appointment or community oversight. Robert had been using the neighborhood watch program as a cover for systematic stalking of multiple women in the community. He had access to residents' personal information through the community Facebook group and text alerts, which he used to select targets and monitor their activities. Police found Robert's apartment filled with surveillance equipment, detailed files on dozens of neighborhood women, and hundreds of photographs taken through windows and from hidden positions around the community. Robert had been creating comprehensive profiles of women living alone, documenting their schedules, their visitors, their habits, and their vulnerabilities. He used his perceived authority as a safety coordinator to justify his surveillance and to gain access to personal information. The investigation revealed that Robert had been entering homes when residents were away, using his knowledge of their schedules and his collection of copied keys to conduct searches and install additional surveillance equipment. He had keys to half the houses in the neighborhood, the investigating detective explained to Lisa. He'd been copying keys for months, claiming it was for emergency access in case residents needed help. But he was using them to enter homes and plant listening devices. Robert's files contained plans for escalating his surveillance into more direct contact with his targets. He had been preparing to create fake emergencies that would require him to rescue women he'd been stalking, positioning himself as their protector while actually being their primary threat. The case revealed how community safety programs designed to protect residents could be exploited by predators who understood how to manipulate trust and social structures. Lisa learned that several other women in the neighborhood had experienced similar surveillance but had attributed Robert's detailed knowledge to his role as security coordinator rather than recognizing it as stalking behavior. "I thought having someone so attentive to neighborhood security was a blessing," one neighbor told police. "He seemed to know everything that was happening, which made me feel safe. I never realized he was the reason I should have felt afraid." The real neighborhood watch program was eventually re-established with proper oversight and background checks. But Lisa moved to a different neighborhood, realizing that the very systems designed to keep her safe had been weaponized by someone who understood how to exploit community trust. Robert's arrest led to the discovery of similar schemes in other neighborhoods, where predators had assumed unofficial community leadership roles to gain access to residents' personal information and private lives. The case serves as a reminder that predators often position themselves as protectors, using authority and community trust to gain access to victims who believe they are being kept safe by the very person who poses the greatest threat to their security. Dr. Elena Vasquez was struggling with anxiety and work-related stress when she decided to try online therapy through a platform called MindEase. The convenience of virtual sessions fit perfectly with her demanding schedule as a pediatric resident, and the platform's emphasis on privacy and professional credentials gave her confidence in the service. She was matched with Dr. Michael Stone, a licensed therapist who specialized in healthcare worker stress and anxiety management. Dr. Stone's profile was impressive: advanced degrees, years of experience, and numerous positive reviews from other medical professionals. Their first session went well. Dr. Stone was empathetic, knowledgeable about the unique pressures facing medical residents, and skilled at helping Elena identify coping strategies for her stress and anxiety. Healthcare workers face unique psychological challenges, Dr. Stone explained during their initial consultation. The combination of high-stakes decision-making, long hours, and emotional burden creates a perfect storm for anxiety and burnout. I specialize in helping medical professionals develop sustainable mental health practices. Dr. Stone's approach was thorough and personalized. He asked detailed questions about Elena's work environment, her living situation, her relationships, and her daily routines, explaining that comprehensive understanding was essential for effective treatment. To help you manage anxiety effectively, I need to understand all the factors contributing to your stress, Dr. Stone said. Work pressures, personal relationships, living conditions, financial concerns, family dynamics, everything interconnects when it comes to mental health. Elena appreciated Dr. Stone's holistic approach and felt comfortable sharing intimate details about her life, her fears, and her vulnerabilities. The therapeutic relationship seemed genuine and professional. But after several sessions, Elena began to notice that Dr. Stone's questions were becoming unusually specific and sometimes seemed to reference information she hadn't shared with him. "How are you adjusting to your new apartment?" Dr. Stone asked during their fourth session. Moving can be a significant stressor, especially when you're already dealing with work pressures. Elena was confused. "I haven't moved recently. I've been in the same apartment for over a year." "Oh, my mistake," Dr. Stone replied smoothly. "I must have confused you with another client. Tell me about your living situation. Do you feel secure and comfortable in your home environment?" Elena found it odd that Dr. Stone would confuse such basic information about her life, but she continued with the session. During subsequent sessions, Dr. Stone made other references that seemed to indicate knowledge Elena hadn't shared. "How are things going with your colleague, Dr. Martinez?" Workplace relationships can be complex sources of both support and stress. Elena had never mentioned Dr. Martinez to Dr. Stone, though she did work closely with him and considered him a friend. "I haven't talked about Dr. Martinez in our sessions," Elena said. "Haven't you? I could have sworn you mentioned him when discussing workplace dynamics. Perhaps it was in your intake paperwork. Regardless, tell me about your professional relationships and how they affect your stress levels." Elena began to suspect that Dr. Stone was accessing information about her beyond their therapy sessions. She decided to test this theory by mentioning a fabricated personal detail during one session and seeing if Dr. Stone would reference it later. "I've been having some issues with my neighbor's loud music," Elena lied during their sixth session. "It's been affecting my sleep, which probably contributes to my anxiety." Dr. Stone seemed sympathetic and offered advice about addressing neighbor conflicts and protecting sleep quality. 2 sessions later, Dr. Stone asked, "How are things with your neighbor's situation? Has the noise improved, or are you still having sleep disruptions?" Elena had never had any issues with her neighbors, confirming her suspicion that Dr. Stone was keeping inappropriately detailed records and possibly accessing information about her life outside their sessions. Elena decided to investigate Dr. Stone's credentials and discovered something alarming. While Dr. Michael Stone was indeed a licensed therapist, the photo on the Mindy's platform didn't match the professional headshots on his legitimate practice website. Someone was using Dr. Stone's identity and credentials to conduct unauthorized therapy sessions. Elena immediately contacted the real Dr. Stone, who confirmed that he had never worked with Mindy's and had no knowledge of the platform. His identity had been stolen and used to create a fake profile. Elena reported the situation to Mindy's, which launched an investigation and discovered that Dr. Stone was actually Marcus Webb, a former mental health aide who had been fired from multiple positions for inappropriate conduct with patients. Marcus had been using stolen credentials to pose as licensed therapists on various online platforms, specifically targeting healthcare workers and other professionals who might be reluctant to report concerns due to career implications. But Marcus's scheme went far beyond identity theft. Elena learned that he had been using the therapy sessions to gather detailed personal information about his victims, then conducting extensive background research to create comprehensive psychological profiles. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been cross-referencing information from therapy sessions with social media research, public record searches, and even hired private investigators to build detailed dossiers on his victims. Marcus had been selling these psychological profiles on the dark web to criminals who specialized in targeted harassment, blackmail, and stalking. The profiles contained victims' deepest fears, their emotional vulnerabilities, their relationship problems, and their personal secrets, information that could be weaponized by predators. But Marcus's exploitation of his victims went even deeper. He had been recording all therapy sessions without consent and selling access to these intimate conversations to voyeurs who paid premium prices for authentic psychological vulnerability. He was essentially creating a catalog of human vulnerability, the investigating detective.